what did you think of Ebrahim Raisi's speech at the UN? Because I know that most of my Muslim friends were like, yes. But I really wanted to get you because I know you like to analyze stuff like that. So how did it feel? What did you think?
Yeah, short answer. Fantastic speech. I would argue it's the best one, but I think we have to really take into a lot of variables here around the speech, right? Let's actually start off with my favorite one is that the Zionist envoy got booted out like immediately. Like, actually the best part about that was, for the uninitiated, like this Israeli envoy held up like this woman life freedom sign while President Raisi was speaking, and like no one cared. Like no one cared at all. This guy was holding up this sign, which I think is hypocritical of itself, because as he's holding up this sign that says, like, I don't even know what it said. It just had something to do with that women life, whatever movement, right? I'm not even going to give it, the respect and that name that it deserves. Like Israel, this month was like strip searching people, right? It's shot journalists. It's killed like women journalists. It's killed like women nurses that are on the battlefield, like escorting civilians out of like a war zone. And so just like the hypocrisy of that is really interesting to me. And at the same time, like nobody cared, right? You would think that a country that was previously, I will say previously, as isolated as Iran was, that the Zionists would at least reach out to their neighbors or like their allies or associates. They'd be like, hey, we're gonna pull this really cringe stunt. Do you want to join us? And you know what? No one did. Even if they asked, it seems that no one did. If you look very closely at that video, maybe like two people turn around and they immediately just turn right back to President Raisi. And then just to get into the content of the speech, right? I think first and foremost, what I think billions, I will say, across the world can agree upon is, the defense of the Quran itself. He held up the Holy Quran. He read a poem about it in recent months for the people that haven't been, keeping up. There's been Quran desecrations across Western Europe. You'd think they would worry about energy prices or things like that because, essentially Europe is sanctioning itself to death on behalf of the United States. But no, it seems like they want to burn the Quran. The Quran gives me a sense of warmth in my heart. If they're trying to burn it to keep themselves, actually physically warm, I would say stop sanctioning Russia, but that's a whole beast of its own. And then finally, if you can just let me go on for just a minute longer, I think yesterday really encapsulates the last year, because just a year ago, right? Western media, all cameras on Iran, the woman life freedom or whatever movement, started off, the foreign plots, there were riots on the streets, things like that. And so everybody was saying, at least like this Twitter army, right, was essentially saying that this is the end of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This was quite a year, 365 days ahead. There was a lot that we're going to get into, I'm sure. But all this to say, whoever was plotting against this Iran yesterday marks their loss. They lost. There was warm greetings for President Raisi. He came out victorious. Everybody that had worked to overthrow, the Islamic Republic of Iran got slapped across the face with all five fingers.
He addressed so many issues in yesterday's speech. He addressed the burning of the Quran, which was amazing because, and a lot of people say, oh, well, it does burn. But I think that's the best thing about it is that Islam tells you to memorize the Quran. So, the saying is you could destroy all the Qurans in the world and a couple hours later, there would be a new one. So there's no getting rid of the Quran. He addressed women's incarceration sorry, my dog is having a blast. He addressed women's incarceration in the United States. He addressed nuclear power. He addressed quite a few things. And watching the Israeli ambassador being escorted out was just like, wow, maybe it is a new world. Maybe it is different, because everybody said when the BRICS summit happened that, everybody makes fun of BRICS. BRICS is a joke. And then you see things like this and you're like, maybe the world is changing a little bit, because Israel is a very prominent player at the UN and usually they could get away with this crap. So I'm pretty impressed with how yesterday went. And wow, since we're on the topic, how do you feel about Iran joining BRICS and immediately becoming a key player through oil bartering?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm enthusiastic about it. I think I was listening to this very podcast where I think Iran was your top choice. I think someone else said Syria. I was actually banking on either one of those two. I think Syria is down the line, but all this to say about Iran, I thought it was the natural choice for many reasons. So one, there's the north-south corridor that facilitates billions to potentially trillions worth of resources and revenue for the region, right? So Iran's already a key player in that. You can't not go through Iran there. Two, earlier this year, they joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which already has Russia and China as key players in there. And so, with that being said, I thought when that moment happened, then it's going to be extremely obvious that they're going to join BRICS. And then the final nail in the head, I think, was when India, right? India really doesn't really need to say anything about Iran. There's really no choice, right? But I mean, there's really like no reason for India to really speak on Iran. But India really went out of its way to say, we think Iran should be part of BRICS. We're going to do everything that we can to make sure that they join BRICS. And I think all this to say, like, Iran has really proved itself to be a key player. Because if you take a look at the last 20 years, during the so-called war on terror, because I think that's like the backdrop of what's happening in the region. Iran survived a lot. It survived crippling sanctions for like decades on end, but then also survived terror plots. It survived Mossad assassinations. There was the falling out of the JCPOA. There was a maximum pressure sanctions rather under the Trump administration. There was the assassination of General Soleimani, where the United States was basically saying we're not going to let your influence bleed out into the region. But despite all of that, Iran played its cards right, despite having all these odds stacked against it. And I think key players like China, India, Brazil, Russia really saw that despite all of this that's happening, Iran is dodging all these sanctions. It's charging right ahead. It's facilitating not only the trade of oil but other key exports, and all the while it's surviving all these assassination attempts, all these overthrows, all this like regime change stuff. And all the while, even on top of that, it's assisting what we call, the axis of resistance, right? It's helping the Syrian Arab army fight, not only ISIS, but also American influence in the region. It's helping out Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's helping out the Palestinian resistance. It's even helping out Ansarullah in Yemen. It's helped create the popular mobilization forces in Iraq. So it's dodging sanctions. It's trudging on ahead economically. It's a military powerhouse on record. The Iranian defense ministers can say, "Oh, well, we never, gave the Shahed drones to Russia. We're not supplying them." But hint, hint, wink, wink, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I was the one who said Syria. That was my dream entry into BRICS. But we need Iran in order to get to the Levant, and I think that's why the entry of Iran was so strategic. And for fear of maybe going out on a limb, it kind of balances out the entry of Saudi and the entry of UAE. So to me, and I might be speaking out of turn, Saudi and the Gulf states don't function the same way as the Levant and Iran. I feel like Iran has a stronger connection to the Levant and Yemen, and I think that this was a good counterbalance to that. And it starts to bring Saudi Arabia out of the Western sphere of influence and into the Arab League as another key player. So now we see Iran emerging and Saudi Arabia both emerging as the two key players in the Arab League, but they're kind of opposite poles without being in active conflict. So I think it was a decent counterbalance. And I'm daring to say, maybe JM, you agree, but I think that the Iran coming out of isolation and joining BRICS has sent a signal to other countries such as DPRK, Cuba, maybe some of more of the global South, and even some of Africa, to start saying, hey, we might be sanctioned to death, but it doesn't have to be this way.